Hello, I'm John Weiss, your MC for today's live streamed Series 2020 digital program and a senior director on the company network team here at Series, a sustainability nonprofit working with influential investors and companies from around the world on some of the most critical sustainability challenges we face, from the climate and water crises to the protection of basic human rights throughout the global workforce. I'd like to start today by saying that we remain mindful of everyone who continues to be affected, directly or indirectly, by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we continue to be especially grateful to those on the front lines, risking so much and working so hard to ensure we all stay as healthy and safe as possible. I also want to thank each of you for participating in today's program. As we come toward the end of what for many of us is the second month of working from home, we continue to be inspired by the ability of so many of the people we work with to remain focused on the broad range of important challenges we still face and on our shared long-term objectives. In particular, we have to highlight and say how much we appreciate the generous commitment and support of our speakers and sponsors who have stood by us on this digital journey to reimagine the Series 2020 conference program. We clearly would not be here today without your essential support. And while it's not the same as spending time together in person, the tremendous participation we've seen in the digital version of Series 2020 over the past several weeks has clearly demonstrated to us that a community of passionate and committed people will always find a way to move forward. When we're talking about the climate crisis, one of the things we must continue to move forward is the decarbonization of the electric power sector, especially as we look to make a clean power grid the source of energy for our transportation systems, our building, heating, and cooling systems, even our heavy industries. To talk about how he sees that future coming into focus, we are especially pleased and grateful to have Mauricio Gutierrez with us today to provide a CEO's perspective on transforming the electric power sector. Finally, just before we begin today's session, I have a few housekeeping notes. First, please note that this session is being recorded, and we will be providing all participants with a link to the recording shortly after its completion. Second, if you have any questions for Mauricio, please enter those in the chat function, the chat box that's located in the GoToMeeting control panel. And we'll, of course, do our best to answer as many of those questions as possible toward the end of our session. And finally, we do have to note there's always the possibility we'll experience some technical challenges beyond our control over the next hour or so due to global bandwidth issues. If this happens, the discussion will pause for 30 seconds or so to allow for bandwidth to readjust. And we thank you in advance for your patience. With that, it is my great pleasure to introduce Series President and Chief Executive Officer, Mindy Lubber.
John, thank you. Great. And friends, before we get too into a formal presentation, if I didn't tell you how valuable it is for us to see your faces, friends and colleagues, so many of us have been on this journey together for a clean energy future and what the future should look like for our kids. And to have you join us for this during this complicated time to be together, your continued interest, your perseverance, your stick-to-itiveness is what gives me hope. We've got to get to that future for our kids. Our life has just shown us what being even more complicated looks like. We want our kids to have a less complicated, a healthy and safe future. And I do believe that every single one of us on this phone or on this call who have been on this journey together are part of that. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for all that you're doing. I'm a little bit more sappy during this lockdown. It just reminds me of the work we have to do and how grateful I am to each of you. So John, thank you. Thanks for spurring us on, for making sure this conversation happens. We're kicking off, as folks know, a week of Series 2020 programming that's going to be focused on the energy sector. And I'm particularly delighted to be joined by a friend and a leader who's literally on the front line of our fight against climate change. Mauricio is unique, and the reason I think he will enlighten us in unique ways is he's candid, he's honest, he tells it like it is. He doesn't want to tell us things are perfectly when they're not, and he doesn't want to tell us it's going to be easy if it's not. He's been a pioneer in an industry that's been highly traditional and has had to pivot and change. And Mauricio has done it in a transparent way with candor, showing us the blemishes and the victories. And for that reason, it's particularly lovely to have the opportunity to work with him. So Mauricio, it's great to see you again. I'd rather it be in person, but even from a distance, you look great there in Princeton, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Mindy. It's great to be here with you.
Cool, welcome. Before we jump into energy policy, and there's a lot of it, I want to say thank you. When I watch what has happened in this crisis and who steps up quickly and boldly and immediately to respond to it, as NRG did, Mauricio, you're standing up the kind of resources you provided to your community, to your workforce, to small businesses and the schools in your area in the earliest days of the pandemic has been really what warms my heart. It's what leadership is about. Our response to a crisis is personal. It speaks to who we are as human beings and as professionals. It tells a story. And your response has been quick, it's been generous, your leadership has brought others along. So, you know, I'm not here to tell you you do everything perfectly or brilliantly, but I am here to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. How you stepped up in this crisis has been terrific, and you deserve a lot of credit for that. So let me jump into the energy side for a minute, and I want to give Mauricio the floor quite quickly to talk to us about the path NRG is on. Not an easy path, but a path for an energy future and what complicates that path and what's going well. And I want to highlight something. You released a new sustainability report just last week. It talked about the importance of focusing on the needs of your customers as you continue to redefine what it means to be a power company in today's world. I know you're referring to your paying customers, and I want to hear how you are redefining it, but I also hope you'll let us know how you and another set of your customers, that being your 4,500 team members of the NRG family, are also doing as we navigate through this coming year. So let me turn it over to you, Mauricio. Again, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Mindy, for your kind words, and it's great to see you too, at least virtually. First of all, to everyone listening to this webinar, you know, I want you and your family, I hope you and your families are safe and well. I also want to echo John's comment and thank frontline workers. You have our deepest appreciation. I think, as you all know, the power industry is part of the critical infrastructure of our country. And throughout this crisis, our goal has been clear, is to protect the safety and well-being of our employees so they can continue providing the critical service and keep the lights on for our customers and our communities. You know, Mindy, I am very proud of how we have responded to this pandemic and of my colleagues who are on the front lines, making sure that electricity is one thing that people don't have to worry about. So, you know, let me just start, and perhaps not everybody's familiar with NRG, so, you know, it's a good place just to give you a brief description of who we are, you know, talk about the trends on our industry and how they have informed and impacted our long-term strategy, you know, as a way of adding some context to this conversation. You know, the first thing you need to know is that the electric industry, we have two models, a regulated and one that is competitive. You know, most Americans fall under the regulated model, meaning that they're served only by their local utility. You know, that's not who we are. NRG is a competitive power company. We don't have a service territory or captive ratepayers, and we also don't enjoy a predetermined return on our investments. We must earn every single one of our customers with compelling products and services, and our power plants have to be the safest, most reliable, and most cost-efficient to be able to compete in that marketplace. It's that simple. Now, you know, the fact that most people probably think of electricity as a commodity with little to no differentiation is not unfair, given how the power industry has operated today. But just like any other industries, like telecom or transportation, or even retail shopping, technology and innovation are changing this perception by disrupting the customer experience. For example, today mobile phones can be personal energy command centers. I can change my consumption, with the touch of a button, or better, with a voice command, like, turn my lights down, or, turn my thermostat off. And the energy usage data is being transformed into actionable information for consumers. Think about it. Our interaction with energy is becoming a lot more personal. Electricity is no longer an overlooked, faceless commodity. Instead, it's something people are actively managing and engaging like never before in our industry. This digital energy experience is at the heart of innovation in energy. Consumers want real-time energy information in their homes and their businesses, and the ability to take action if they need to. The digitization makes this possible. From connected to smart devices to big data. The Internet of Things, as we call it, is enabling the Internet of Electricity. I invite you all to imagine one day when electrons and data are flowing in a multi-directional grid. This is really going to be a completely new paradigm for the power industry. Another major trend is the increasing level of choice and personal experience that consumers are expecting with nearly everything they buy. They're becoming used to getting services delivered the way they want, where they want, and from whom they want. In the power industry, this level of customization is only starting to emerge. In the past, all that was expected from power providers was safety, reliability, and affordability. Today, customers want more. They want power that is cleaner, customizable, and connected. Consumers are demanding plans and solutions that suit their lifestyle and values. Why would a family and somebody that is commuting, that is never home, should buy electricity the same way? Finally, I have to touch on the transition to cleaner power and the need to decarbonize our economy. Individuals and businesses are not waiting for regulatory or government action. They're taking matters in their own hands and pushing for change. There's no better illustration for a demand of cleaner power than the RE100, which is a group of the largest companies committed to buying 100% renewable energy. Competition and market forces have made renewable energy the most affordable form of generation now. We need to make it now accessible to everyone. So, as you can see, our industry is being significantly disrupted. From renewable energy to smart thermostats, smart devices. Technology is empowering consumers like never before. These are the reasons why at NRG we're changing and redefining our company by putting customers at the center of our business. Mindy, you were mentioning our journey, and what I can tell you is over the past 4 years, we rebalanced our portfolio to better match retail load with generation assets. Also, in recognizing that our industry is in transition, we made our business stronger and more resilient. We reduced our total debt by 70% and expanded our sustainability framework to make it foundational and necessary for our long-term success. We also accelerated our carbon reduction goals to align with the 1.5 degree trajectory. But importantly, because we did it. It aligns with our customer preferences. Science-based goals like this one matters. And for the power sector, for us, perhaps it matters a little bit more. Electrification is one of the key levers to decarbonize our entire economy. And as companies like ours modernize and become cleaner and pivot to meet the needs of our customers, we are at the forefront of enabling progress for everyone. This social contract that we have with our customers is very important to me, especially as we navigate the challenges and consequences of COVID-19. As we're thinking about the new normal and what it may look like, I think we have a tremendous opportunity to leapfrog and build a better system. This means incorporating resilience and the cost of carbon in our decision making. Electricity is quickly becoming the fuel of the future, and its importance is only going to grow as other sectors start embracing electrification as a way to decarbonize their own companies, their own industries. As an industry, we need to continue evolving to make sure that we can keep up with the needs of modern society. And we at NRG, we want to be at the forefront of that change. So that's just wanted to open with that message, and hopefully this provides a good context for the conversation we're going to have today.
Well, there's a lot there, and we'll come back to pulling it apart a bit. There's seeing the commitment to science-based targets to a 1.5-degree future and how you've jumped to that and how you're going to get there are just crucial. So I want to come back to that, but I want to take a minute to think about, while we need to be dealing with the immediacy of this crisis, and we're going to see, whether it's infrastructure bills or stimulus money, my guess is globally we'll see $10, $15 trillion with a T, not a B, coming to our economy, money that didn't exist 3 months ago. Nobody was talking about that kind of new infusion of money, but we're going to need it to build out of this economic hole that we've built ourselves into due to the pandemic. And we need that. We need to rebuild the economy without question. It seems to me, and I'm always looking at the glass half full, as I know you are, Mauricio, that if all of a sudden globally we're looking at $10, $15 trillion, that we could go in one of two directions. We could build infrastructure of the past and lock ourselves into a high carbon future, or we could truly think about what the infrastructure of the future looks like coming out of this pandemic in a way where we build our economy, create the jobs that we so desperately need, but really learn and move in a different direction. What are our chances, and how do we make that happen? I mean, there's an opportunity here that I'm not sure we've all fully grasped.
Well, I think we're still, as we're thinking about the new normal, we shouldn't forget that we're still in the middle of this, fighting this pandemic. So, I start thinking about some of the lessons learned that we have seen from COVID-19 that relates to climate change, and perhaps that can help us think about how do we leapfrog, how do we make this system better. I mean, I would say that the first for me is, this should be a wake-up call, that the risks are very real and they can happen. Opinions aside, we just need to trust science to guide us so we can actually mitigate the risk of future global crises like this one. I guess the second one is clear to me that the human welfare and our global economy are completely linked. We shouldn't just look at our communities, our economy, our employees as individual stakeholders with disparate needs. They are connected. at a global level. And our decision making needs to, take that into consideration. One of the great lessons I think from this crisis is that global collaboration is possible. I mean, we have now proved that when the public and private sectors come together in a swift, decisive, and collective action, it does make an impact, and it changes the trajectory of where we're going. Finally, I would say that I think we all have a better appreciation of what telecommuting can do, and we need to rethink completely how we work and we live. I'll just share our experience. This is, I think, the 9th week that we have closed our offices, and almost overnight, we moved 90% of the people that could work from home, working from home, without losing any operational capabilities. So, I mean, this is just perhaps a small example that, we need to break the mold. We really need to think about how is this, presents an opportunity to rethink completely how we work and how we travel, how we interact with each other. And, it should not go to waste. I mean.
Well, I hope our policymakers and others hear that, your wisdom, because if anything we have learned over the last 9 or 10 weeks, what systemic shock to our system looks like. The systemic risk that has hit us from economic to human health and well-being is certainly something none of us could have imagined. We're pivoting as well as we can, but there's no question that being prepared before it hits makes sense. And as it relates to climate change, something we've talked about so much, we can either be highly prepared or we could be ill prepared. And at the moment, we're certainly not where we need to be, but we certainly have learned, as you said, these are global problems. They're going to demand global collaboration. They demand an individual response, corporate response, and policy response. And we're hoping our policymakers and regulators are ready to pivot in not only addressing the problem at hand, which we can't ignore, we've got to find our way out of, but to realize the similarities as we move forward. I'm sure your team's aware, and I'm sure involved. We've got a couple 100 business leaders up on the Hill tomorrow virtually. We used to do this in person, where we're talking to people with R's and D's, conservative, progressive, rural, urban, to really dig in and look at what do we need to do and what are those lessons learned, as you noted, Mauricio. So thank you. Let me dig in a little bit deeper into your sector, the energy sector, the electric power sector in particular, since you are clearly very much on the front line of decarbonization. If we're going to get to that future for our kids that we all want to deliver them, it is how do we get to a decarbonized future? And in fact, I would say one of the most promising developments we've seen over the last couple of years is the leadership of companies like NRG, your leadership, Mauricio. You've set carbon reduction goals, aimed squarely at bringing the economy to net zero emissions by mid-century. That's what we ask of companies. You're following the science, as you said. Let science tell us what we must do to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And you're doing it as efficiently as any company we've seen. So without asking you to have a crystal ball or making any unrealistic predictions, how do we see this landscape continuing to evolve in a way that will help ensure your sector and others can achieve that goal? What kind of policy support do you need? You've got an enormous both opportunity and a burden. And what do we need to do to help you meet that burden and to meet those expectations and to build that future for, I know, your kids and mine alike?
Yeah. No, I mean, Mindy, I think, and broadly speaking, and then I'll get into the energy sector specifically, I think there is a tremendous opportunity in modernizing and making our communities more climate resilient. I think if policymakers adopt a regulatory framework that sends the right signals, we can really start a super cycle of investment and entrepreneurship from the private sector. And it is important, and I want to highlight the private sector because, as you also said, I mean, right now we're tapping our federal funds, not in the billions, but in the trillions of dollars. So we will need the private sector if we want to be successful in our fight against climate change. You know, one way what we can do this is to, you know, and you and I have talked about this, introduce an economy-wide price on carbon. But that's not the only thing. I know that many of the states are advancing their own clean energy policies, and I think there is an opportunity to integrate those goals that they have into the existing market structure that, you know, has provided so many benefits to consumers. So I would say that that's the first thing that comes to mind on the policy side. The second thing is I think we need to step back and really, you know, reimagine our traditional power system, the power model. And given where we are with technology, I think we need to start putting consumers in the driver's seat. You know, we can talk about what is the role that each of the, you know, the companies that are in the value chain can play. But let me just offer this. Imagine the potential impact if every single American who wanted 100% renewable energy could actually make that choice, regardless of what they did. I think that could be an accelerator to decarbonize our electric system. So we need to ask policymakers, how can we empower those consumers, you know, to make that choice? So, I mean, one, you know, perhaps more broad, and the second one, you know, more specific to the electric system. You mentioned, you know, some of the things around, you know, how the landscape is evolving, and you know, I think I touched on it on my opening, you know, comments around the macro trends that we're seeing in the industry. You know, the first one is the decarbonization of our economy. You know, will include the electrification of other sectors like transportation and manufacturing. You know, I mean, I think it's clear to everybody that renewables are the lowest cost of generation, and renewables will continue to grow. But we also need to be practical, pragmatic, that we need to maintain reliability along the way. I mean, we all know where we want to get to, but we need to strengthen the system that allows us to get to that goal. Because if not, then we will completely polarize the different parties that need to come together to make that happen. And I also mentioned that consumers are, you know, taking more control of their energy through technologies, through smart devices, and what I refer to as the Internet of Electricity. You know, with this control, they are already changing the electric system and the sources of energy. I mean, just think about what the consumers can now do. They have now changed the way we used to think about electric demand, you know, during the day. You know, for the people who are more in tune with the power industry, they're flattening the hourly demand curve. When it gets really warm and prices are high at the peak hour of the day, they can actually adjust their thermostats. They can change, you know, whether their devices at home are operating. They can change that curve, and it's already happening. And they are responding to the right price signals. You know, one thing that I mentioned is consumers want choices. They're getting used to it. They have everything now on demand, on their own terms. They want the specific products and services that fit their needs. I actually believe that the one-size-fits-all approach to electricity is over. And we need to be able to provide products and services that are customized, you know, to every single one of it, to every individual, that creates value for them. So I know that I covered a lot here, Mindy, but I wanted to connect both the policy side as well as, how am I seeing this landscape evolving and changing?
Well, that's great. The detail as well as the larger framework is great. So to make sure consumers have the opportunity to really customize, what I need is different, as you said, than my neighbor down the block. Nobody's home most of the day, and so we don't need what somebody else needs. What other policy changes at the state or federal level can we be helping to make sure are created? You talked about a price on carbon, and I think that goes without saying, and hopefully we can get to a serious discussion about that sometime sooner rather than later. You got to put a price on something that costs society money. And we've got renewable portfolio standards at the state level. Where else do you want to see change? And we've got hundreds and thousands of people who can help make that change.
Yeah, so we need to have a framework that actually allows consumers to choose, to have access to different options. And we need American ingenuity and entrepreneurship to give them that, those products and services. But as technologies are changing, we also need to strengthen our transmission and distribution system. We need to make sure that we make it the most resilient transmission system, and that our distribution system, can allow to integrate all these technologies in a very seamless way, to make sure that the products and services that consumers are being offered with, it can work seamless with the grid. So this is what I refer to as, a multi-directional flow of data and electrons, where homes can be both. They can generate electricity and they can consume electricity. So I think if I look at the three big areas, number one, price the cost of carbon into our markets, into economy-wide price on carbon. The second thing is integrate these clean energy policies into the current competitive market so we don't lose the benefits to consumers. The third thing is, open the market so consumers can have a choice on whom they buy electricity and from what sources. I think that can accelerate the decarbonization of our economy. And finally, we need to invest in our transmission and distribution system so we can make it more resilient and can help us integrate the new technologies that we're seeing both on the generation side and on the demand side.
Well, obviously the key is to how we do that. I would imagine, and I know NRG's got a base in Houston and a base in Princeton, and you live in the lovely town of Princeton or somewhere nearby. But if there are any lessons learned from the hurricanes and the storms and what happened to devastate that city, and the pandemic, and how we collectively learn from those kinds of crises, how to not let that happen again as it relates to new and could be fairly immediate climactic changes. Any clear lessons that you all learned in how you're running your business out of Houston, and what points we should take away from that?
Yes, well, as I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, I mean, the electric system or the electric industry is divided into regulated and competitive markets. I think Texas is the best example of fully embracing competition. Both the generation and the retail sides are completely open for competition, and we have seen, entrepreneurship and I would say creativity and different products and services being offered to consumers in Texas. I mean, at any point in time, you have hundreds of companies fighting to earn the business of consumers. I know when that happens, there is only one winner, and that's the consumer. So I think there is an opportunity to really tap into the American ingenuity, creativity, free enterprise, to be able to provide that to consumers. On the other hand, they really focus the utility, or what used to be the utility, in making investments in the transmission and distribution system. And we have one of the most resilient ones in Texas. Unfortunately, we have been hit with a number of natural disasters, like you mentioned, Hurricane Harvey. And every single time, we learn new lessons. We have fortified the transmission system. We have fortified the distribution system. Many of they're no longer wooden poles. A lot of the cables on the distribution service are underground. I mean, we have made it more resilient. We refocus the entire power industry, and we really tapped into the strengths of every single one of the I guess, participants of that value chain. So I think there is an opportunity for everybody to participate in this, to start this new super cycle of investment. But it does require political will. It does require a different regulatory framework, to be able to achieve what I think Texas has achieved. I actually think of Texas as the perfect example of what the power industry is going to look like, not just here in the United States, but in the world, where consumers are at the center of these. They are the ones who, have the greatest benefits by making sure that every single one of the participants focuses on their strengths.
It's interesting because Houston is also telling us another story, and certainly this pandemic, about a shift in an industry sector and where the oil sector is now compared to where they were 2 years ago. And it will be an interesting thing to watch. But certainly we're seeing some of the most radical changes in our economic sectors as we could imagine. But we have to, we're completely with you. We need regulatory change, we need policy change, and we are working hard with you and so many others to get there, whether it's a price on carbon or a portfolio standard, or frankly, building into the stimulus packages, and I'm sure infrastructure packages to follow. If we're spending $3-4 trillion in the United States, and as I said, 10 or 20 trillion globally, this is our moment in time, our opportunity to build out the infrastructure for EVs, the infrastructure. If we're building roads, use clean cement and clean steel. If we're building transportation, let's look at our real transportation and public transportation systems. How do we grasp this moment when, again, flooding into the market, $4 trillion that didn't exist? It's been just, whether it's the Fed saying we'll print the paper, or our Treasury, this is our moment in time. And so we want to make sure we're joining with you all in business to have an impact on those stimulus packages. So we're not spending money on one thing, we're spending it on another. Is your industry sector coming together around that, looking at this once in a lifetime opportunity that really just hit, within the last month? And how to make sure those trillions of dollars are put in the direction that you're talking about and not moving us to the same old, that won't get us to where we need to go.
Well, I actually think that, we've been talking about this now for quite some time. What is the role of electricity is going to play in the future? I am convinced that electricity will be the fuel of the new digital economy. As we see the electrification of transportation, we see the automation in manufacturing. Electricity consumption is going to increase. It is not going to decrease. So also many other sectors are looking at the electrification as a way of decarbonizing their own industries, and they see it necessary to be able to align with their own customers' needs. We see that especially on the commercial and industrial customers, where they have their own sustainability, they have their own sustainability goals. So it's how do we help them achieve that? And you mentioned that there's going to be a tremendous amount of investment to leapfrog it, but let's just be also realistic. I mean, we're tapping right now federal funds just to fight this pandemic on the trillions. So we need the private sector, we need private capital to help us advance, our decarbonization. And we need to reimagine how I guess different companies in the power industry how they participate on this. So, for example, I'll just give you. I'm going to use NRG as perhaps as an example of this. We see more and more ourselves as an enabler to help other industries and other companies achieve their own goals, their own decarbonization goals, and perhaps sustainability goals. We partner with developers to help build new renewable projects. We're also simplifying the way small and medium-sized companies buy renewable energy. In the past, only the very large companies were able to do that because they were the only ones who could sign the long-term contracts with renewable plants. What we have done is truly democratize to some extent the access to renewable energy. So we step in the middle. On one side, we partner with developers. On the other side, we provide to small and medium-sized companies exactly what they need, and we simplify the access to renewable energy. So, we don't necessarily need to, be completely in the entire value chain of the power industry. We don't need to develop, build, operate, own renewable projects, but we definitely need to make sure that we connect our customers with the right technology, and then we give them choices. And what I can tell you is that when we give them clean choices, they take them all the time. Because the reality is renewable energy is now, as I said, is the cheapest form of generation. This past year, we actually entered into, we brought around 1,600 megawatts of new solar generation in Texas by providing them long-term contracts, so developers have the certainty that they will have an off-taker. We're also working closely with the city of Houston and with our own customers to provide specific products and services for electric vehicle owners. And in many cases on manufacturing companies, we're helping them turn their facilities into literally zero-emission virtual power plants, where they basically can ramp up and down their own production given the right price signals. The fact that other sectors are looking at electrification as a way to decarbonize their own operations, it also puts some responsibility on us. And I think that's why our carbon trajectory as an electric provider becomes even more important. That's one of the reasons why we accelerated our carbon reduction goals that you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation. We aligned them with the 1.5 degree scenario because it was the right thing to do. It was supported by science, and what that means for us is we have to reduce our carbon emissions 50% by 2025 and net zero by 2050 with a 2014 baseline. And just so everybody knows, we are already 80% of the way to our first goal, and we have completely clear line of sight on how we're going to get to 2025. And so I think it's important that I put this in context, Mindy, because when we say we have reduced carbon and we tell people by how much, it's difficult for them to grasp the fact that we actually can move the needle. So let me put this in context for everybody who's listening. The carbon reduction that we've had since 2014 is equivalent to all the carbon avoided by all the electric vehicles that are circulating the world. That is the kind of impact that we can have as a company and as a sector. So I think if we want to achieve our decarbonization goals, we absolutely need to electrify the transportation sector. We need to electrify manufacturing through automation. But and it's important that customers, commercial industrial customers, raise their hand and sign up for renewable energy, for clean energy. But I mean, make no mistake, Mindy, I mean, for us to actually have this type of commitment, it doesn't mean just changing our energy supply, like perhaps for many people. It is completely disrupting our business. It's rethinking, our role in the power industry, and it's redefining, how we do things, how we do things, and what are the steps that we need to take to continue having a compelling value proposition for our investors, but do it in a way that is more sustainable for the long run. And I think that's really what we've been doing the past 4 years.
It's great. I know there are probably some questions from the listeners, and I'm going to ask John to share them with us. But your comments about, we've got a lot of people committing to goals in 2050. And as you say, goals in 2050 are a long way off. But having those immediate goals along the way, this year, 2025, 2030, 2030, that's what will give people assurance that we're able to get there. So really good to hear about your both immediate as well as long-term goals and how you're meeting them.
Yeah, Mindy, if I just add a little bit more, because I think it's important for people to understand that we need a sensible, responsible path that doesn't jeopardize all the other things that electricity provides to us, safe, reliability, affordability. The way we got so far to those goals have been difficult, but the right decisions. I mean, first is investing capital in new technologies. We converted a lot of our coal plants into natural gas. We invested on carbon capture and sequestration projects, but that was only one part of of our strategy. The second part of our strategy was changing the role that power plants have in the system. You can refer to it as the utilization of power plants. I often hear people, saying, they have the perception that coal plants somehow are still running like they were running 5 or 10 years ago. Well, I have news for them. They're not running anymore. We have them as an insurance product. It's an insurance product when it gets really cold or really hot, that, until we continue to advance our system, they're there as a peace of mind. I mean, not all of us want to use our, car insurance, but we all buy it. And we know it's a good thing to buy it, in case we need it. Well, this is no different. We wouldn't want to put the reliability or the affordability of the electric system at risk because we want to make it cleaner overnight. We cannot do that. We need to find a sensible path to get us to that future that we all want. And the more pragmatic or practical we are on that path, the more progress we're going to make. There are transition fuels that perhaps they're not part of the of the future of the end, but allows us to accelerate the proliferation, I guess, of renewable energy. So we need to think about that as a way of enabling that future, as opposed to making it completely binary. I want this and I don't want that, and that's part of what creates a standstill in many places and in many states. Is that sensible path, that strengthened transition path to get us to where we want to be.
Great. So these are good views into what you're dealing with and thinking about every day. Let me remind folks that we don't have a lot of time left. I know John has a few questions, but if anyone has any questions to drop into the chat box, please do. In the meantime, John, if you've got, I know a few, shoot, and we'll do our best.
Sure, yeah. We'll take, we don't have a ton of time, but not surprisingly, a number of questions we have that build on some of what you've discussed today, Mauricio. I'll start with this one. Many CEOs don't want to set long-term goals when they don't know the technology is going to be there to help meet them. So how did you overcome, thinking about a 2050 goal for NRG, how did you overcome that obstacle? And do you think that we're sending a strong enough signal and providing the right kinds of incentives to help accelerate the kind of innovation that's needed to get us there?
Well, I mean, when you have a 25 or 30-year goal, you never have a very clear line of path. You need to have the commitment. You need to know where you want to be, where you want, and set milestones along the way. That's why it was so important for us to set, achievable milestones. Our 2025 goal now, didn't look that achievable 5 years ago. And when we actually started making changes and making deep transformations in our business, clarity became it became a lot clearer how we were going to get there. I cannot tell you how we're going to get to our 2050 goal right now with complete certainty. I mean, we have a path that can get us there. Absolutely, for 2025, for 2050, we have a good idea, and that's why we completely flip the traditional competitive power model that used to be, generation centric. Now is retail centric, and we're focused on our customers, and we're focused in giving them what they want. But I mean, definitely, we're going to see technologies being developed, and we know that battery storage are right behind renewables. Perhaps they are where the renewables were, or 10 years ago. It's going to take a little bit of time, but we're starting to have some line of sight on other technologies. We know that wind and solar are now they're now the cheapest form of generation. They're going to continue to be built going forward. Right behind it will be battery storage. But there are similar breakthroughs on the demand side of the equation. I mean, we used to have completely inflexible demand. I mean, we had our morning peak and we had our evening peak, when everybody was leaving from home and everybody coming back from home. Now that is changing. Like I said, I mean, people have much more control of their energy usage, and that's gonna introduce a lot more, I guess, innovation and technology to allow us to get to net zero. So I'm actually hopeful that we have started this process, but like we have been talking about during this conversation, we need some real fundamental changes in policy. We need the right guardrails, not gates, guardrails, to make sure that private capital come in and spark this level of investments that we need in our sector. Because I mean, electricity is going to be a lot more important in the future than it is today, and today is already critical for our way of life. Just think about in the future where it's running our cars and it's running our manufacturing. So we need to start today. We need to start building that investing in that future today.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. We have a few other questions here, and cognizant of time, I'm trying to decide which one to pull out and throw at you next. Let me give you this one that maybe none of them are easy to answer quickly. But I think this is one that folks who know NRG might be asking themselves. And the question is this: how does a company like NRG, which still has the majority of its generation coming from coal and gas, make the kind of pivot needed to align with a net zero or a 1.5C pathway?
Yeah, no, I mean that's a fair question, and I think what they perhaps miss is that we also have reduced our carbon emissions by over 40% the last 5 years. We have retired a lot of fossil fuel plants. We have enabled renewable generation to be built. But we have to, like I said, we have to do it in a very responsible way. We cannot overnight just shut down our power plants and put the system at perhaps risk of reliability. So the easiest way that I have said it before is our customers are going to drive the makeup of our generation portfolio, and our customers are aligning with a clean future, a decarbonized future. So we are going to make the changes, responsible changes along the way. Just like we have achieved our 2025 goal, I have no doubt that we will achieve our 2050 goal. But we have to just do it in a responsible way, and so that's how I think about it.
Yeah, thanks so much. As always, we're going to run out of time before we can ask all of the questions, and I have a couple of housekeeping notes to offer before we adjourn. So, obviously, want to say thank you very much again, Mindy. Thank you, and let me just make a special note, as you can see on the screen, a special note and a thank you to all of the sponsors who provided such instrumental support for Series 2020. And again, we want to remind you that you will receive a follow-up email with a recording of this session, everyone on the call today. Also, for those who are registered for the full Series 2020 program, another session, Electric Power and Industry and Transition, will take place tomorrow, May 12th, with a continued focus on how power companies are increasing their ambition and setting more aggressive greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. To register, to learn more about other upcoming sessions in the days ahead, please go to www.series2020.org. And finally, I also wanted to make special note of the Mindy made mention of this earlier in the call, the Virtual Lawmaker Education Advocacy Day, or LEAD, on Climate 2020, which is happening tomorrow. Now have 300 companies registered to participate, which makes this, I believe, the largest corporate advocacy event for climate action ever. So Ceres, along with our partners, will mobilize this group, which includes investors as well as companies, for virtual meetings with key lawmakers on both sides of the aisle to call on Congress to build back better from COVID-19. And of course, we'll be urging Congress to support a resilient, climate-smart economic recovery. And if you'd like more information about that event, you can find it at ceres.org/leadonclimate. And with that, we will call this session to a close. Thank you all for participating. Thank you so much, Mauricio and Mindy, and hope you all have a great day and be well.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.